Welcome to the program. I'm Scott Bevan. Well, there appears to be no respite for emergency crews in Victoria tonight as the flood frontline moves from town to town. While the peak has passed at Horsham in the state's central west, the focus has shifted to nearby Warracknabeal and the community of Kerang in the northwest. In all, more than 50 towns have now been affected. Prime Minister Julia Gillard says the scale of the flood damage in Victoria and Queensland means the full cost of this national disaster will be impossible to estimate until the waters recede. Lisa Whitehead reports.
51 towns, 21 municipalities, 4,000 people affected, and the toll is growing as the worst floods in Victoria's recorded history are far from over.
The capacity of Australians to be able to stand in the face of these sorts of events is nothing less than remarkable. They have been through an absolute nightmare, so many of these people and their communities, over the past decade in particular, and now they've got to cop this.
A lot of sorrow, but also a lot of pride, seeing how Australians responded, and a lot of determination about how we're going to get through this and how we're going to rebuild from it.
One of you girls like to hold the flag for this man?
In the small community of Quambatook, 15 kilometres west of Horsham and downstream on the Wimmera River, it was all hands on deck as floodwaters turned these paddocks into an inland sea.
We're downstream of Horsham, so we're going to cop what Horsham has, but there just hasn't been a lot of indication of what the levels are. That's been the worst thing.
Roads were cut off and locals were forced to use tractors and four-wheel drives to cart sandbags to properties trying to keep the water at bay.
Right down the back, or?
Brad Grayson's house on his 30-acre property at Quambatook lies a few hundred metres from the edge of the Wimmera. But today the water was almost lapping at his door.
Last night there was no water out there. It broke the levee bank and it was in his paddock in about an hour.
Like others in so many areas of Victoria, the locals here in Quambatook can't remember floodwaters ever reaching levels like this before. The water has been rising 20 millimetres every hour overnight and breaching levee banks. The peak could hit 7.8 metres later this evening, and if that happens, the houses around here will be cut off by floodwaters.
Please, look after your own house. Stay in your own street, stay in your same...
Community meetings like this one in Quambatook are being held in towns bracing to be hit by this huge volume of water swelling Victoria's river systems. Further north lies the town of Kerang.
Sandbag, we're expecting water to come into town. We don't know where, so we're just taking precautions.
Just purely in water terms, we're facing an event in excess of 1 in 100 years. Our SEC represents...
Local Mayor Max Faring says he's grateful to have more notice than anywhere else in Victoria to have time to prepare.
We have got a little bit more time because of the terrain. It's been slower coming at us, but it's much faster than previous floods because we've had two already this year.
3 hours drive northwest of Melbourne on the Loddon River, the town of Kerang is readying itself for rising floodwaters that are expected to cut the town off for up to 3 days. While substantial levies are expected to keep most of the water out of the town, a lot of work's going into protecting the local power station that services 20,000 people across a wide area.
They're a bit over a metre, so they've been told that should be enough, so hopefully it will be.
We believe that we've done everything possible with the support of Power Corps.
If it does actually get cut, how well prepared is Kerang for that?
Well, that would then trigger a whole range of things. We believe that the water can still be supplied to Kerang and series looked after by temporary generators, but I think the other things will overtake that and people would have to evacuate more and more.
Despite the warnings, many people are choosing to stay.
Well, we've topped up with food and everything back at the house and gas bottles and water and ice and that, so yeah, as long as the house doesn't go under, we should be right.
As floodwaters in the town of Horsham began to recede today, most residents breathed a sigh of relief.
It's all flooded right around, but we're a little bit higher here, and we had a look at the flood plan and we knew that we're a little bit higher.
The floodwaters peaked at the predicted 1 in 200 year level at around midday, and only a handful of houses were inundated. The sandbagging of houses in many streets yesterday had done its job.
The sandbags have, well, done as much as they can, and it probably hasn't quite got as high as we thought it might.
Lofty Turgoose had been up all night, but he was still keeping watch and trying to keep up morale.
A couple of yabby nets out, a couple of fishing rods and a few decoys over there. Yeah, just for a bit of fun.
But the townsfolk of Horsham are keenly aware some farmers have nothing to smile about, with a fifth of the summer harvest ruined in flooded areas.
Now, for a lot of these people, they've stood on the front veranda and been able to look over what were apparently magnificent grain crops, which for many of them were going to be the nirvana, that they could pay back the debt and get ahead. And now they're standing out on that same veranda looking at those same crops and they're 2 feet deep in water.
Until the floodwaters recede and the extent of the damage done to roads and other infrastructure is revealed, the full cost to the economy is anyone's guess, but it will be staggering.
We don't even know what the price tag is yet because we can't even know what the full flood damage is.
In the days ahead, as flood records continue to be broken and more towns are inundated by this huge volume of water making its way to the Murray River, the experts are just praying for no more rain.
If we're lucky, the floods which are up around St George and coming down the Condamine will come down after the Victorian floods have passed through. So we'll have a longer period of flooding rather than bigger floods. If you did have the two coming together, which would require much, much more rain on top of the rain and the floods we've already had, then it would be a significant disaster and a real challenge for everybody to manage.
Lisa Whitehead with that report.